All right. Hello, everyone. So, today we are going to be starting our webinar in about 5 minutes here. So, I'm going to start sharing my screen and make sure that everything is set up. So, y'all can just hold tight for a bit. All right. Just a few more minutes here, and then I'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming in. All right. I'll give it about one more minute before I will start. But before I begin, does anyone have any questions about the webinar? Can everyone see me? Can everyone hear? You can just pop a message on whatever platform you're watching, and I should be able to see it here. Everything seem okay? All right, perfect. So then that is 10 a.m. for me, and I will go ahead and get started. So first off, thank you all for coming. Very excited to present our second webinar, and this is the troubleshooting and documentation webinar. So if you attended our first webinar, you know that we kind of did an overview of the platform and really just talked about how to build a basic study. This webinar takes it one step further, and we're going to be looking at a study that has already been built, and I'm going to be showing some tips and tricks and just general strategies for how to troubleshoot that. So, quick introduction. My name is Adeline, and I work for Labvanced. I typically write the documentation, and I do some support calls for the Americas. So, let's go ahead and get started with the first topic of our webinar. So to start, I keep mentioning this word documentation, but if you're new to our platform, you may not know what I'm referring to. So let's dive into that really quick. We define documentation as our comprehensive website of explanations for all of our features. We have text based explanations, we have videos. There's tons of content on this website, and I will be showing you that shortly. You can access the documentation from the Labvanced platform in the Learn tab. It's in the top right corner, in that kind of dark gray strip at the top. Or you can simply type in labvanced.com/docs. There are four main categories of the documentation. And again, I will be showing you the website in a second. The main category is the guide, and this is the text based aspect to the documentation. So if you like reading instruction manuals, doing that control find feature just to find a specific question or answer, you could probably look in the guide and find a very comprehensive list of everything you need to know about Labvanced. We also have videos in the documentation, and they're essentially the guide just in video format. So it is someone sharing their screen and narrating where exactly to click to find certain features. We also have the blog, which is very exciting, actually, super interesting. And what this is step by step text and pictures for how to build certain kinds of studies in Labvanced. So I think we have a Stroop task. We've got, I think we have a lexical decision task as well. Basically, lots of different specific studies. So if you'd like to implement something very technical, very specific, you can typically find the instructions in the blog. Finally, we have the FAQs. And that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today is the question and answer portion where we've kind of added in common questions that our users have and then typed out the answers to them for you. Of course, you can always reach out to us via the live chat if you can't find your question in the guide or you can't find it in the FAQs or you have something very technical, very specific that you need us to look at. Please do reach out. But today I'm going to be showing you how you can find lots of answers already typed up in the docs. So let's start with the fun part here and dive into the content of our webinar. So I will go ahead and switch the screen that I'm sharing. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the documentation itself. So this is that labvanced.com/docs that I was just explaining. And I'd like to give you a pretty comprehensive walkthrough of this because we are going to be referring back to it over the course of the webinar. So this is the landing page. This is the first thing you're going to see when you navigate to this site. And as you can see, we have 6 categories. I talked about 4, but I will dive into each of them. So the guide right here, that is that full text documentation that I was mentioning. Video tutorials, they're all organized into categories, but that's where all of the videos on the page live. Implementation questions and troubleshooting is what we're going to be looking at today. So that's the FAQs that are specifically related to, say, an object that doesn't work or a reason why the study has been freezing, that sort of thing. So this is all like user questions that we've popped in there and then typed out the answers. The general information in FAQs is more about questions about how Labvanced works or why we do things the way that we do. The blog is those articles and walkthroughs, and we're also having some user success stories popped in there. So if you notice that Labvanced has been used in a paper, or maybe you're scrolling through and you want to see how different researchers have been using Labvanced, this is definitely the place to look. We also have a section for documents and files. So this is the information on how to download Labvanced so you can use it offline. All of our kind of legal documents, those are all housed in here as well. So let's dive into each one. First, if I click on guide, this is what we land on. So this is the big, long introduction to the guide. and it does include our first video right here. So if you look on this left sidebar here, there are tons of options to click on, and you can notice all of them correspond to those same tabs that you have in the Labvanced platform. So you've got the Study Design tab, an overview of all of those features. Um, I should mention they do include these full color images, which are very helpful, especially if you haven't quite logged into Labvanced yet and you just want to get a sense of what's going on. This is a great place to start. So you can see we have lots of descriptions here: tasks, blocks, sessions, groups. Everything is fully described. The next one is the task editor. I would say that this is the piece of the documentation that I use the most for my own research, is going under the guide and the task editor. So this is all of the descriptions of essentially everything. So the trial system frames objects, variables, events, randomization, pretty much everything is right in here. You can just keep scrolling down, you can click around. You can also use our search bar right here because this is a huge section. I would recommend using the search bar. Um, so yes, there is lots and lots here in the task editor section. Then we have the eye tracking section. Now, we have been putting out a good number of updates to our eye tracking lately. So if you've been following our kind of update sequence, this would be a great place to look to see all of the different things that we've added. We also have a lot of eye tracking in the troubleshooting section. So definitely check that out. The study settings, again, all of the descriptions of these three columns here, and these can be super important for changing those settings that you may forget about but are very necessary to your study. The description tab has information about the description tab. So this is all of that, like, generating the image for your study, popping in the keywords, how long it should take, that sort of thing. We've got the variables overview here, the translate feature, the run tab. This is going to be super important for counting how many subjects you have. All of that information is written in here. Then we have publish and record. Again, this is super helpful to read before you publish your study. Just make sure you're familiar with the way that we do things. Crowdsourcing, we do have directions for Prolific, Sona, and ClickWorker. So if you're planning on using one of those crowdsourcing systems, I highly recommend you come here and read our fully comprehensive guide for how to do that. Then we have information about sharing. This is much more important for when you're going to publish a study and you can decide if you want it in the library or not. And then data view and export. And I'm sure more updates are coming to that soon. So that's the guide. It's basically all of Labvanced just condensed into text instructions. Then we have videos. And again, they're organized kind of the same way. So you've got main videos, task editing, events and variables, stimulus objects, data collection, and sample studies. Sample studies, highly recommend looking at those before you start. Sometimes just watching someone else do it and kind of internalizing processing can make your own study creation much easier. So those are the videos. These videos are also, they're the same as the videos that we have on our YouTube page. So if you're on our YouTube right now and you want to flick through some of our playlists, it's the same videos. The implementation questions and troubleshooting. This is where we're going to be today. So we have it organized into two categories. We have troubleshooting questions with lots of different drop downs here and study creation questions. So troubleshooting has things like just in general questions, or maybe you're using a mobile device and you're having some trouble eye tracking troubleshooting, that sort of thing. So we will dive into that later. And then study creation question is like randomization. Maybe a variable isn't quite working correctly. We get a lot of questions about using counters. So this is a great place to start if you want to use a counter, such as you want a variable that increases every time someone clicks a button, or you want to count total number of seconds or something like that. This is definitely a good place to start with that. Adding variables as text, all of that sort of thing. So we are going to dive into that today. Then we have the general information. So this is what I meant about questions like, how does Labvanced work? So these questions are: how secure is Labvanced? where's the data going, that sort of thing. So if you have questions about that, it is in the general information section. We also have information about licensing. So if you're on a free license versus a group license, that sort of thing, precision, programmatic use, and API, which can get a little complicated. So do reach out if this isn't making sense, and directions for how to use Labvanced offline. This is very helpful if you've built your study in Labvanced, but you want to run it on a computer in person. Completely fine. Of course, you can do that. These are the directions for loading it onto your computer such that when a participant sits down, you can just double click on the shortcut and go right into it. There's no log in, log out kind of thing. So you can simplify your experiment running. Lastly, we have the blog, and these are some of the walkthroughs I was talking about. So instructions for creating a Stroop task, instructions for lexical decision. We have three more actually. This is a super good one to look at if you do research with pediatrics. We do have an infant eye tracking study walkthrough because there are some different settings for that, given that infants don't typically like to sit still for eye tracking. So we do have some features that can help you with that. Finally, we have some user success stories within the blog, and we have a lot more of these coming, so sit tight. But this is where you can read about a specific researcher who used Labvanced and the study that they did and just some general Q&A about it. So if you're curious about who's using Labvanced and how, that's a great place to start. All right. So that is our documentation. The documents and files are also found on the Labvanced platform. So actually, when you click on it, when you click that link, it actually brings you to Labvanced to those files. So I'll go ahead and stop there with documentation, but we will be coming back to that very shortly. So now that we have done that, does anyone have any questions about what I just talked about in the documentation where something is located? If you want to just comment below this video, I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. If we're good, I can just go ahead and get started. But I want to make sure we have time to answer everyone's questions. There will be a Q&A at the end, so give you a second here. Everyone seem okay? All right, great. Don't hesitate to ask a question. I'm here for that. So, all right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share the Labvanced platform, and we can start troubleshooting our study. All right, perfect. Just check and make sure. Yes. Okay. All right. So this is the study that I've built for this webinar. Um, it was fun to build, but it is a little interesting purposely adding errors so that you can go back and fix them later. So how this is going to work is I'm going to show you kind of the process of testing your study once you've built it, how to find the answer to your question if there is a question, and then how to fix it. So we'll kind of be jumping back and forth between the Labvanced platform and the documentation. So there is going to be a lot of screen switching, so please bear with me. We'll go nice and slow, okay? All right, so let's start with the first task in our task list, which is going to be our introduction. So let's go ahead and open that. All right. So remember, this study is full of errors and we're trying to find them and fix them. So a lot of trial and error here, but it'll be fun. So it looks like in our introduction, we have two different frames, basically just outlining what's going on in the study. So what I'm going to do for each of these tasks is we're going to do a test run of just this task, and we're going to see if there's any errors and what we can do about them. So let me make sure. Okay, so the study is still loading. So while it does that, I need to switch which tab I'm sharing so that you can see the study. All right, so now we're looking at our study here. So let's go ahead and get started and see if there's anything wrong with this task. All right, so we've got some instructions. In this study, you will participate in three different tasks, and they have no relation to each other. Do your best. Easy, right? And it looks like we're supposed to click this button. All right, perfect. So now we have the second set of instructions. First task is about personal choices, second is about perception, third is about short term memory. Easy. And now we have another button to click. And the recording of the task ended. Awesome. So I will stop sharing that tab and jump back to the platform here. Bear with me, friends. It is going to be a lot of tab switching, but that's all right. Okay, so I didn't notice any errors during this task. It looks like all of our buttons worked correctly, but let's double check that because you never know. So in our events over here, what we need to do is we need to make sure that there's no variables that need to be recorded that are not being recorded, and we need to make sure that everything is appropriately selected. So we can look at our events tab and our variables tab. And it looks like we have no variables on these frames, on this frame in particular anyway. Let's open up our event here and scroll through quickly. So it looks like we are selecting that button and the action is next frame. So this frame looks pretty good. This next one, when we clicked this button, the task ended, which is a pretty good indication that this button is functioning properly, but let's double check here. The first part of troubleshooting is just double checking your work. All right. So we're using a different kind of trigger here to achieve the same results. So in the last task, we used a button bar trigger. This is a mouse click trigger. Both work just fine. And we are moving to the next task. All right. So this task looks pretty good. I think we can move on from here. We'll click save, go back to our study design, and let's open task number 1. Okay. So let's see what we have here. It looks like we have a brief instruction frame, some sort of stimulus presentation, and a feedback frame. So let's do a test run and see if there's anything wrong with this one. Okay. All right. We're loading. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and start. Now remember, when we're doing these test runs, we're only test running one task at a time. So we're just looking at that set of 3 frames here. So we get some instructions and nothing else. It looks like my mouse is gone and this frame is not moving. So we're going to go ahead and start troubleshooting here. The first thing to do when you get something like this, when it looks like it's frozen, you can't find your mouse, is you're going to open the console. So on my laptop here, I have to push this FN button and then push F12. Most computers, you're going to just push F12, but because the buttons in the F bar row have something else, like another feature to them, I have to push the FN button first. All right. So let me check and see that you can see my console here. Ah, you cannot. That's okay. I will upload a picture of the console afterwards. So basically what I've done is I've just pushed F12 and like a bunch of code appeared on the side of my screen. And it looks like I don't see anything red. The biggest red flag for you is if you see text written in yellow or red. Mine does not have anything like that. So I'm assuming that there's nothing gravely wrong with this. So I'm going to flip back to Labvanced here, and we're going to troubleshoot this task now that we know that there's nothing wrong in the console. So again, first step, whoop, wrong one. First step is to press F12 and check the console for errors. Okay. There we go. We're back in the platform. Okay. All right. So we didn't make it past the first frame, which means that there's something stopping this frame from moving, and I couldn't see my mouse. So the first thing we're going to do is check the features of the frame. So down here in frame settings, we can already see our error. So it looks like hide mouse was turned on, which is typically fine. but that already answers our question of why we couldn't find the mouse. Secondly, we need to check and see if there's an event that's not being executed because this frame didn't move and we want to move to the next frame. And there is no events on this frame. So essentially, this frame was not programmed to do anything, it just appears. So we have two options here. We can either set a duration for the frame so it ends on its own, or we can add an event that says after however many seconds, move to the next frame, or when the person presses space, any sort of trigger. I'm going to do it the easy way here, and I'm just going to click this button and make sure that my duration is 1500 milliseconds. That sounds about right to me. So I'm going to click save, and that's our first error found and fixed. So that's a pretty simple one. If your frame is frozen or something just isn't advancing, check the console, step one. If there's no yellow or red text in the console, you're good. Step number two, check the settings of the frame and check the frame events because you may just be missing an action. So we're going to do a test run again. And I need to switch to the tab where the test run is. Okay. Oh, we have some time. It's still loading. All right, perfect. So let's test run the same task again and see if that fixed our error. Okay, perfect. So now we've gotten into our task here, and we're just going to click on the image that we like. You chose, ooh, that was too fast, wasn't it? So there's an error. Undefined colored image in undefined milliseconds. So it looks like we have two variables that are not actually being recorded. Or maybe they are being recorded, but they're not recording the correct thing. So let's go ahead and stop sharing that and go back to our platform and see what's going on here. The first thing I'm going to do before going back to the platform actually is I am going to take us to the documentation and we're going to do a little bit of reading here. So it seems like the issue is with some variables because what we saw in the text was undefined, undefined. So let's read up on our variables really quickly and just see if there's anything that answers the question outright without us looking into it. So we've got some really important variable properties here. So that's something to know that the properties of the variable are very important. We've got different types of variables, so we have to figure that out when we go back to the tab as we need to know what type of variable are we looking at. And we've got a warning here about being very careful deleting variables. Okay, good to know. So let's go to our task editor category now and go to that variables tab and see if there's anything else here. Okay, so we're going to need to look at the variables tab. Properties are very important. So here's bigger descriptions of those important properties that we mentioned. So we've got several possible values for data type. That looks like it may help us a little bit. Scale, format, start value, reset at trial start. So this is definitely something to be aware of. This is commonly where errors are, is that a variable that's not supposed to reset is checked for that box, and so it is resetting at the beginning of every trial, or the opposite here, where we want a variable to reset and not continue to count, but it's not resetting. So that's some information about variables here. Let's see if we can find the error ourselves in the platform. And if not, we will go to the troubleshooting section. All right, perfect. So we've already fixed the first frame, which means our error must be somewhere here on the second frame. So let's go to the variables tab and see what kind of variables we have. It looks like we have a factor, and we have this variable called choice, which is a string variable. It is being reset at trial start, recorded, So this looks fine. These are the properties that the documentation was talking about checking. So this looks good. It looks like we're recording which choice was made because the images are named light and dark. So we're trying to record which one was chosen. Then we have this reaction time variable. It's numeric and it's being reset at trial start. That's correct as well. So let's go to our events because that means that the error isn't with the variable, it's probably with the event that's happening. So let's go to this record choice event. The trigger is mouse click on one of the images, and it looks like we want to record the name of the choice. And right here, we can see that this box is empty. So it looks like when it was built, someone did this, where they picked constant value string, thinking that the string name of the image would be inputted and saved. That's not quite how we want to do it to record the name of an image. We're going to click this pen icon here. We're going to go to trigger mouse because that's how we're triggering. And we simply want to click stimulus name. And that should solve the issue. The other issue we had was that it was saying undefined milliseconds. And that issue is happening right here with reaction time. Because it's reaction time, it's commonly assumed to be a time variable or to be saved as a time. That's not quite how we want to save it. If you remember in our variables tab, we saw that reaction time was a numeric variable. So all we want to do is kind of the same thing as above. We want to go to mouse trigger and simply select time from frame onset. That way, instead of recording an actual UNIX timestamp, it's just recording the milliseconds since the frame started. It keeps things a lot simpler for you and for the participant. So let's click save, and we'll see if that fixed our error. But the other error we noticed was that this third frame, the duration was a little too fast. So I'm actually going to increase this to 3 seconds instead of 2. Save here. And finally, let's do a test run and see if we fixed all of our errors. Okay. While that's taking a second to load, does anyone have any questions about how I got to that point? Does everything seem okay? So step 1, check the console by pressing F12. Step 2, go to the documentation, read up on what you're looking at. Step 3, check everything that you've already done and see if you can find a little blank spot there. So let's do a test here. So we've got our instructions. We've got our 2 pictures. There we go. You chose the light colored image in 2000 milliseconds. Dark colored image in 1000 mil. Perfect. All right, so does everyone see how I did that? It was an error with how the variables were being recorded. So the variables themselves were set in the correct format, but the event was recording them as something that they weren't. So big message here, check those variable settings, check those events, make sure that they match up. All right. So that seems to solve the problem of our first task. So I'm going to go back to our platform. And we're going to go ahead and check on our second task. Okay, make sure you're saving your progress as you go. And let's check task 2. All right, so looks like kind of similar. We've got an instruction frame for 2 seconds, and then we have this presentation frame here. All right, so let's do a test run and see what's going on. Okay. So we've got our instructions, and we have the dreaded white screen. So this is a very, very common error that happens in studies is they look perfect, everything looks like it's been built correctly, but then you go to run it and the screen is just white. So again, step 1, we're going to push F12. And I apologize if you can't see my console. but I am getting some red text. And what I'm getting here, I'm going to see if I can snip a picture of it and show it to you guys because this is um, kind of an important thing to note here. So let me see if I can. Okay, here's what I'm going to do because I want to be able to show you guys this. Sorry. Give me 1 second, guys. I am going to show you a picture of this error because it is actually kind of important. Okay, cool. So let me share this with you. All right. Can you guys see? Yeah, so this like document 1 from Word. So this is the error I'm getting from my frame here. And it says that something is undefined and it can't read the properties of a reference to an object property, an action set property, a trigger, and some sort of array callback. So lots of errors in the console means that there's a major problem with the study. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our documentation and we're going to see if we can find that troubleshooting question about the white screen because it is kind of a common thing that happens. But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be common because we know how to fix it. So let's go into troubleshooting here and scroll down a little bit. All right, so here's our question, guys, right here. When I run the study, the frames are blank. Why is this? So this issue can be more complicated, but the first step is going to be make sure you've properly added your stimuli to objects and assigned them to trials. Okay, cool. Then add a text object to all the frames that contain a variable. In the text box, we're going to add the variable to the box. Then we're going to run it again because we want to know if a variable is actually being recorded. So in our little error message, we did see that there was something about something being undefined, can't read properties. So it looks like we're going to be hanging out in this first paragraph here. Okay, so let's go back to our platform and we're going to start our troubleshooting process. Okay, and I was in task 2. All right, so this frame seemed to work just fine. So let's go to this frame. In the editor, we can clearly see that there's objects that are supposed to be appearing, but when we run the study, they do not happen. So we did step 1, we checked the console, and we got some errors. What those errors mean is we should check our variables tab first. So it looks like we have 3 variables here. We have a data frame, a reaction time, and one of our global variables has been added to the frame. So in our data frame, this is where the images are being read out from. So let's take a quick look here. So it looks like we've got one column full of images and a second column full of string values that should be related to those images. So the image of the grasshopper is an animal, the image of a mountain is just nature. Remember, in this task, we're trying to decide if an image shows an animal or nature. All right, so the data frame looks fine. It should not be reset. It doesn't need to be recorded. Reaction time looks good. It's numeric. It is being reset and recorded. And trial number is out of our hands. That's an automatic variable from the study. So let's go to our events here. The first event is read image, and I'm guessing this is where our problem is going to be. So you would think that the image would simply not show up and the buttons would still appear. But because everything is tied together in this frame, it's all or nothing. So let's open up the events and take a look here. So we're reading out an image. The trigger is frame start, which is why the frame is blank, because if on frame start the event can't happen, then nothing happens. So we have 2 events happening here. we have a set object property event and a record variable event, or two actions, I should say, within an event. So our target is image one, and we're setting the file data. And what we're doing is we're reading from the data frame. So this first little bit is correct. We want image one to be assigned a file from the data frame. Column one is correct because, as you remember from our data frame, the first column was the images and the second column was words. The error is right here, actually, is the row was never selected. For data frames, commonly what you're going to do for the row is select a variable, and the variable is probably going to be trial number. So that way, as you're moving through the trials, each consecutive row on the data frame is being shown. So I believe that will actually fix that error. All that was wrong was that we were missing a reference to a row, which aligns with what we saw in our error message, where the reference to object property dot set value, that was one of my first red text errors, was that there was no reference to an object property because the row was blank. We can probably find our second error in the same way. So we're recording a variable, it looks like. Let's see, we're selecting from the same data frame. The row is also trial number, but the column is 2. So it looks like what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a variable that records that text string that gets associated with an image. And the error is actually right at the beginning here. No variable was ever put in. So that actually aligns to my error where it says that this property was just undefined, like this recording was undefined, because there was no variable actually added to the event. So let's go ahead and click select, and we're going to create this variable, and we're just going to call it name. The data type is going to be string, and we do want it to reset and be recorded. And click OK. So now we have our images being read out from the data frame and assigned to the image 1 based on the trial number and the column 1. And now we have a little string variable that's recording the name that goes with the image. So let's click finish and click save. Now for the next event that we see on this frame, and this next event I actually added because it is part of troubleshooting, but we're going to make it kind of fun here. So this next event is called show answer. And it looks like mouse clicking on either of these buttons is going to cause this text to become visible, and we're going to save the reaction time. So what goes in here is actually one of our troubleshooting steps that was in that second paragraph from the documentation, and that's to determine if the variable that you've created is actually being properly printed or recorded. So what I'm going to type in my text box to confirm that variable is the correct answer was, and then I'm clicking this red button, this insert variable button, and I'm going to click name and click OK. Add a period at the end. Okay, so this is actually a common troubleshooting step because I've just created a variable that should be recording some sort of value. It can be string, it can be numeric. Just popping it into a text box on the frame and then doing another test run can help you troubleshoot if you've created that variable correctly. Funny enough for us, this is actually part of the experiment and represents another error that was here, was that this text box should be invisible until these buttons are clicked. So I'm going to go to Objects, and I'm just going to turn this text box invisible for now. Okay? Did you see how I did that? I just changed the visibility to 0, and it's invisible until this show answer event, where the visibility becomes 1. Okay? But the first thing we did was type that variable into the text box using the red button. So now we are going to test if we have fixed all of the errors here. And I will flip to the other tab. Okay, we have some time while this loads. Does anyone have any questions on how I got that? Did everyone see in the documentation? I was following the same steps that were in that that troubleshooting question about the white frame. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and test run and see if we have fixed the problems. So we've got animal or nature. All right, so we've got an image. It looks like a leaf, but I see some legs, so I think it's an animal, and that was correct. And nothing is happening, guys. So we missed an error here, which is understandable considering we had some much more intense errors to focus on. So let's go back to our platform, and we are going to fix what seemed to happen there. Alrighty. So we have our image, right? These two events worked. The show answer event worked just fine. However, as you can see, there was no event that caused this trial to move to the next trial. And that's something that we didn't notice until we had fixed the more important errors first. This is a great example of why it's so important to do these little test runs before building your entire study, doing a test run of all of it, and finding that it just doesn't work in 4 or 5 different ways. So definitely test run every single task when you're done. So what we're going to do to fix this error is we are going to add to this other event here, this show answer event. So same trigger, the buttons, the action to display the answer, and then I'm going to add a delayed action. And I'm going to say after 2 seconds from clicking the button, so the button gets clicked, the answer gets shown. 2 seconds later, we're going to jump to the next trial and click finish and click save. And then we come over here and we make sure that that did get added. All right, and that should work for us. So we're going to test run it, hopefully just one more time, but you never know. And we're going to see if that fixes all of the errors in task number 2. Is everyone following me so far? Seems like we're doing pretty good. I haven't seen any questions pop up yet. Okay, perfect. So let's test run here. All right, our instructions, our image, and 2 seconds later, we get the next trial. Perfect. All right, so I think we have fixed all of the errors here. I'll go through a couple more trials just to make sure, see if I can get to some of the nature scenes. All right, and there we go. Perfect. Wanted to make sure that it wasn't just going to say animal for every single trial. So it's always good to run through pretty much the entire trial, if not the entire thing, just to make sure that you're getting all of the correct data here. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. I think we did it, guys. So that is task number 2 all done, and we can move to task number 3. All right, make sure you're clicking save. And let's go to our task 3. Oh, this was not supposed to be there. All right, task number 3. So we've got a couple frames here. This one looks a little bit interesting. Let's see. Pay attention to the video on the following frame. And we have this sad little dog-eared document. Then we have a 5-second break. And then we have some questions. So before I even do a test run here, I know that there's something wrong. I can see the error, and I know that it's not going to work because of whatever is going on with this. So let's focus in on this error here. So the object that we're using is an iframe. And I see that something's going on with this YouTube refused to connect with this iframe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the documentation and we're going to check the troubleshooting section and see if there's anything about iframes. Okay? All right, let me check if everyone see. Yep. Okay, so we're on our documentation again. This is the question we just used with the frames being blank. Let's scroll down a bit. And here we go. Here's the question right here. When I insert a YouTube video link into an iframe, it showed an error message. How can I fix this? This is a pretty common thing, and it's a quick and easy fix, my friends. So if you've copied the video link directly from YouTube, say you literally just hit copy paste, what you need to do is you need to change the URL just a tiny bit. So instead of watch, which is what's in this URL here, you can see right here, instead of it saying watch, we need to change it to say embed. Okay? Because we're not just watching the YouTube video, we are embedding it into the study. So, quick and easy fix, but the answer is right here under troubleshooting, tasks, and trials. So, let's go back to our platform and see if we can implement that fix. Okay? I'm getting so good at this tab switching thing. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, quick thing to note before we start. If I start editing this link right here, notice how the default trial is highlighted. It's going to change all of the trials to be the same video, and that's not quite what I want. So let's go trial by trial. There's only 4. And we're going to check our links and see if maybe that's the issue here. So I see my YouTube link. Yep, and it says watch. So all I have to do, let's skip to the end of the link, sorry, is we're going to just change this watch to embed. Perfect. And you see that immediately it flipped right here to the correct video. So we'll click save. Second trial, let's do the same thing. Scroll to where it says watch. You don't have to change anything else. Literally just erase watch and type embed. And then you've got it. Let's do it for the third trial. A lot of these things are kind of easy fixes, but they're not quite obvious, which is why we have typed them into the documentation for your convenience. And the last one. Embed. Perfect. All right, so we're looking good. I think they're black because they're taking a little bit to load on my computer. Not a problem. All right, so that's our major error here, is that those links were kind of broken. Now, because I edited them in here, like in the actual trials, when I click the default trial, like this, it is still going to show as broken. Let's check and see if that's okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and just try it, guys. Let's see. We'll find another error soon, I'm sure. So let me go ahead and switch what I am sharing here. Make sure that you guys can see me doing a little test drive here. All right, we've got some seconds to load. All right, and let's try here. Pay attention to the video on the following frame. An error occurred. Please try again later. All right, so there's another error here. Oh. And then the study jumps to some questions. Okay. So it looks like we've got something going on here that we need to edit further. Okay. So let's go back to our platform. All right, so something's up with these videos here. Let's see if we can figure out what it is. The first thing I noticed is that the participant had to click the video button to get it to start. Because there was no event here to actually start the iframe, that's okay. I think we can leave it. But it looks like there is something up with these videos not connecting. Now, whether that's a problem with the Labvanced platform or if the videos are just not uploaded anymore, that could be a different story. So we can check that by making sure that we're getting just this condition 1, trial 1, because this video is loading. So let's go into randomization here. You notice that the trials are set as random. Because I just want to test that first trial, I'm going to hit Fixed by Design and make sure that I'm seeing that first trial first. So let's click OK. And let's do a test run again and see, because if this trial isn't working as well, then we need to do a little bit more troubleshooting. So I'm going to flip my tabs again. Okay. Iframes can be a little bit tricky. So if we can't solve this issue right away, we're going to do um, kind of the last resort troubleshooting thing, which is reach out to Labvanced via the live chat. Nothing wrong with doing that. We've checked the guide first, we followed our steps, so we're doing pretty good. Okay, so this
Hi
video
everyone.
seems to work.
In this video, I'm going to be talking about
Oh, it's
using
me.
data frames. And this is a relatively new feature of ours. And data frames are great because they
Hmm.
increase both the structure and the flexibility of your study.
Okay, so did everyone notice what happened there? We've got a lot going on with this. So let's go back to our platform. Okay, so this first video did play. So it may just be that these videos are no longer uploaded, which is totally fine. You just need to switch the video that you're using. The other thing is that I had to click it to start it, which is typically fine, but this frame does have a duration on it. And it was me talking in the video, but my voice did not stop when the frames switched. So that's not quite what we want here. So what we need to do is we need to add some control events. All right. So we can let the participant click the video on their own, but let's do a stop video event because that's kind of annoying to keep hearing me talking. So we need to do frame end because the frame does have a duration on it. And we want to, oop, it's an iframe, so we can't use a normal control object video. Let's see here. What are we going to use for an iframe? Hmm. So it looks like the iframe isn't super intuitive here. So let's go back to our documentation and we're going to see if we can get some more information about iframes. So we checked troubleshooting, right? We figured out about the video link, but let's go into the guide itself and we're going to see if we can get some information about this. So in the task editor, it is one of our objects, and let's see what we have on iframes. All right, iframe object. It can be used to display an embedded other website inside the experiment. In order for the iframe to be displayed, the server controlling target URL must set the header as this. So I am a little bit confused about iframes. Now that I've checked the documentation, I've troubleshooted a little bit. I think I have the links correctly. And I have read up on iframes themselves and made sure that my videos are working. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to do the final step of troubleshooting, which is done typically after you've checked all of your resources. And that is going to be to reach out to Labvanced and say, hey, I don't understand iframes. I need some help. And that's totally okay. We've exhausted all of our other resources. So the way you do that is you can't see it on my screen because of the way that it's being shared, but there is that little green icon in the bottom with the online support. And you can just type in that box, hey, this is my username, this is the study number that I'm having trouble with. And you can find the study number at the very end of the URL. So I'm in the troubleshooting webinar study. The study number is this string of 5 numbers. Can you help me with some iframes? Okay. Does that make sense? We've gone through all of our troubleshooting steps and we still need a little bit of help so we can reach out. Okay? So let's say we've gotten our help and it's fixed. Let's do our last task here and see if there's any errors here. So all it says is thank you for attending the webinar. So this should be pretty straightforward, right? Let's go ahead and do a test run of our task. because even the simplest tasks with one little frame, one tiny thing, can have some errors in them that we do need to troubleshoot just to make sure that we're getting everything perfect. You never want to publish a study that's not as best as it can be. So we're testing, we're testing. Thank you for attending. And it looks like nothing is happening. I'm clicking around the screen. It's been a couple seconds. So there is actually a final error that we have to troubleshoot. So let's go ahead and do that and see what we've got. So we've got our frame and we have no events, which means that nothing is going to be happening here. So let's set a duration. Let's give it 3 seconds. And for my final event here, I'm just going to call this end. The trigger is going to be frame end because I set a duration, and the action is going to be end of the session. Now, if you notice, we actually have an update to this. So I'll do it again so you can see. So for our jump actions, it used to be jump to and then end session. Now we have 2 events, which can be super helpful to you. So the first one is to accept the participant, send them their crowdsourcing money, they completed it. The second is a reject. So the recording session is ended, but the data is not marked as complete so that you can still bounce your data sets. And the subject stays on the current frame. So you're going to have to type something that says, hey, unfortunately, you didn't meet our criteria or something was wrong with one of your responses. We can't send you the crowdsourcing code. So that's really helpful if you're doing like an intake questionnaire and you want the subject to be rejected if they answer a certain question right at the beginning of your study. So I'm going to accept and end session, click finish, and do a final test run here. One more screen flip here. Stay with me, my friends, and we're almost done. Okay. So we're starting our final frame here. Got a couple seconds going, and it ends. Perfect. So it looks like our study has been totally troubleshooted. We have done the troubleshooting. So let's do a final look at our study design. Because now that everything works great, we're just going to check one more thing, guys. Stay with me. We're almost at the end here. But there is one more kind of glaring error in our study, and that's in the study design. Something super important is that if you haven't added all of your tasks to one or more blocks, the study will run without them. And if you notice, we have introduction, task 1, task 3, and then end. Task 2 never made it into the block. So if we were to do a full battery run of the study, we would be missing a task. So let's go ahead and add task 2 and click save. And now I think we are done. The last step with your study is to do a full run, recording the data, everything, and make sure that everything works smoothly. So we have fixed our study, and now I'm here to answer any questions you may have. I guess this starts the Q&A portion. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, please just comment under the video, and I should be able to see your comments. Or you can send us an email, type in the live chat, whichever is more comfortable for you. So I'll hang out for a couple minutes if anyone has any questions. But thank you guys so much for watching. All right. So either that was perfectly clear, or I'm going to get some emails later today, which is completely fine. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream then. And if you'd like to ask me a question, totally just email us. You can email me. It's Adeline at labvanced.com. You can email me there, and I'll answer your questions there. So thank you guys so much for attending our webinar. And this recording will be posted on our YouTube page um, in an hour or so. So thank you guys.